grew up very happy. Things started to change when I entered high school. And it was a big change, and I didn't know where I fit. And I couldn't really find my footing. And so I found I had this hole, and I didn't know how to fill it. So I started to fill it with food. And I probably gained 40 or 50 pounds in that first year. And also dove into sports, because sports was kind of my go-to. I grew up in a neighborhood full of boys, and I played sports, and that's what I did. Very unhappy. I wouldn't redo high school if you paid me $1 million. When I got to be a senior, I decided I was not going to college. I could not even entertain the idea of doing another change and losing my footing again. So I didn't. And I can't even believe my parents didn't, kind of force me, but they went along with it. I worked 3 jobs that summer, and by August I was like, I'm not doing this. I need to go to college. So that's when my father started getting gray hair. And we needed to seek out someone who could help us find room that was left in the freshman classes, because now it was mid-August. So based on that criteria, he came up with a list of colleges. My dad and I set out to visit, and I ended up at Elmira College in upstate New York. And although that was really scary, I met friends, I excelled academically, and I found my footing. I met someone very special in the first couple of weeks, and I hadn't really dated in high school, and that filled the hole, right? So because that filled the hole and made me feel whole, I wasn't going to let go of that for any reason whatsoever. So that became my world. And throughout that first year, even though I was fairly happy, I continued to eat and gained even more weight. And by the end of my freshman year, I was a size 16 and probably close to 170 pounds. My self-esteem was in the toilet, and wasn't sure what I was going to do with that. That summer I went home, I got control of some things, lost probably half of that weight, went back to school, and had a great sophomore year until the end of that year when my boyfriend, my everything, informed me he was transferring to northern Arizona. Ripped the gaping hole back open, and I thought in my infinite codependent wisdom, I can't stay at Elmira where all my friends and my familiarity is. I got to transfer too. So I went off to UMass, which had a student body of 35,000 students, coming from a college with 1,100. That, coupled with my fear of being alone and abandonment with my boyfriend halfway across the country, disaster. I lasted, I think, 8 weeks, and I dropped out. Came home, and I started to fill out applications and go to northern Arizona. My dad said to me, are you going out there for the best education, or are you going out there to be with him? And I said, I'm going out there to be with him. And I was accepted, had my bags packed, and 2 weeks before I was going, he called me, told me not to come, and broke up with me. And I can't, looking back on it, I know it was my neediness, and it was so burdensome for him, I don't think he could tolerate it. So talk about the hole, now even wider and bigger and needing to be filled. I went back to school. I did what I do best, is perform, achieve, just put one foot in front of the other. So I went back to school to make up those credits, and saw a therapist for a short time. And this is very interesting considering what I do for a living. I asked to see a therapist, and my dad said, no, you have your family, we're here for you. And after about 2 weeks, he finally brought home a card of a psychologist in his office and said, give him a call, but don't let the neighbors find out. It's kind of that generational thing and the embarrassment that comes with that. So I called. It wasn't a great experience. It wasn't really the right therapist for me, but I didn't know that I had any choice and I could change. So went back to school, and then decided when I was done catching up on credits, I was going to go out to University of Denver. I wanted to get out of New Jersey. There was nothing there for me. So I went out there and excelled academically there, met friends, and again met somebody my second semester. So that hole got plugged up again, and it was a rebound now that I look back at it. But at the end of that time, I knew I was going to be moving back to New Jersey, and he proposed. And I said yes, even though I knew it probably wasn't very right. But given the choice, with the codependency, it was better than being alone, right? So that was the choice. So came back to New Jersey, found a job in New York after a while as a compensation analyst. I had a degree in psych, but thought I wanted to pair up business and psychology. Human resources sounded great. there's nothing human about human resources. It's paperwork and statistics, and as a compensation analyst, I was working with numbers all day. And the relationship with my fiance really wasn't going well. And probably a year after I was home, I hooked up, not in the sense of the word of that they use it today with kids, but from a college friend of mine from Elmira. He and I had been friends for a long time. We were friends after graduation, and we'd all get together, a couple times a year. But this time when we got together, something clicked, and we looked at each other differently, and it was romantic. So he broke up with his girlfriend that he was living with. I broke up my engagement, and a year later we were married. We moved to upstate New York, and now my codependency is probably at its height. He was my everything. Moved to New York, no job, no friends, no family. He was it. He was my entertainment. He was everything, and that burden did not go well. I couldn't find work in my field, so after a while, I went back to school to take a few psych courses to see what I wanted to do, talked to a professor after class, and between the two of us came up with, she said, well, what about counseling? And I thought, well, I've always been a good listener. People seek me out. I wanted to do helping profession. I thought about being a doctor, but couldn't get better than a D in physics, so that wasn't going to work. So I said, okay. So she said, my dad works at University of Scranton in the psych department. She said, let me give him a call. Paperwork came. I signed up. I got into University of Scranton. As soon as I started taking courses, it was such a great fit. I thought, this is what I'm meant to do. So that was good. The marriage continued to deteriorate. And after I graduated from Scranton, I got a job doing substance abuse counseling. And I loved that. And I was also working with codependency at the time. Funny that I could be helpful to other women, yet I couldn't help myself. And although I was doing well with my profession, my personal life was just falling apart. So about 6 months to a year into my job, I decided to seek out my own therapy. This time found a good therapist and was working with that therapist about a year. And then my husband lost his job. And he couldn't find work. And that went on for about 2 years, and things got really bad. And one day I came home from work and he was gone. There was a letter on the table that you need to do this, this, and this, or the electric will be turned off, the gas will be turned off, I'm not happy, I'm out of here. And I was just like, okay, now what? Thank God I had that year of therapy, because even though I was devastated, I said, okay, I can't let this ruin my life. I was unhappy too, I didn't have the courage to leave myself. So he did it for me. So everyone thought I'd pack up and move back to New Jersey, but I didn't. I said, okay, I'm going to stay the course. I'm going to continue to work where I'm working, stay in the house, and start to really develop my female relationships at work. Because all my life, I had mostly guys and boys as friends. I just got along with them better. I had more in common. I never really had girlfriends. So I started to cultivate that. And through my therapy and through that support system, I was able to stand on my own 2 feet. My husband called a few weeks later, said, I made a mistake, I want to come home. And I don't know where I came up with it, but I said, no. I said, you can't. You can come home to New York, but you can't come home here because we have a lot of work to do if we're ever going to make this go. If I hadn't done that healing, I would have been like, yes, come home. And it would have been the same stuff 2 months later. So we went to couples therapy. He was still unemployed. I was still working. And then he got a seasonal job about an hour away. And a couple months later, we still went to therapy, and then he was offered a full-time job. So at that point, we had been separated a year. Are we going to stay together, or are we going to stay apart? And we decided we would stay together. So we sold our house. We moved into an apartment. I was getting kind of antsy doing substance abuse treatment. So through a contact he made at Corning, he was working for Corning at the time, they had an internal EAP. 2 months later, got a job doing EAP work, which was awesome because now I could expand my skill set and not only do substance abuse, but do a whole lot of other things. In a day, we could see somebody lost their pet, somebody's embezzling on the corporate credit card, marital issues, somebody's teenager isn't going to school, you name it, we saw it. And that went on really, it was great. We were both working, we could travel, we had money, and we developed such a strong support system. It was the happiest I think I've ever been in my life, besides Elmira College, and then my dad got sick. And he got sick with cancer, and it wasn't good. So I'm trying to divide my time and head down to New Jersey on the weekends and care for him and help my mom and my sister. And I just couldn't do both. I was just drained. So I left my job at Corning and got a part-time job at CDS, which was doing career coaching. They were under the umbrella of EAP, and after I left EAP, they sought me out and they said, hey, come and work for us. And I said, what do I know about career coaching? I'm like the poster child for like not knowing what to do. They're like, oh, you'll learn, just come. It was a great company, started by women, run by women, the leadership was women. It was an awesome, awesome job. And meanwhile, a year later, my dad passed away. And after he died, I had no energy, I had nothing left to give. There was no way I could do any kind of counseling. So I left my job just to take time to heal, to grieve, to find my footing. And I didn't know if I wanted to go back to counseling. So what I did was, I don't know if you know the Finger Lakes region, but there's probably 150 boutique wineries. Yes. And I love that. So I decided they didn't have enough people to work in the industry, so I went back to school for enology and viticulture and found myself doing biochemistry and making wine and growing grapes and doing all that and working part-time at the wineries on the weekends. It was awesome. But at the end of the year, when I was offered a full-time job and I had graduated, I said, no, it's time to go back to counseling. That was really my first love. So I did that, went back to CDS. Now they gave me a supervisory role, and so I'm back there doing that. And probably a year later, my husband loses his job at Corning. He got laid off. And I thought, oh, crap. But I made up my mind. I said, I am not going to do what I did last time he lost his job, and I'm going to do things differently. And I had a whole new skill set, and I had a lot of female friends, strong female friends, and a lot of friends who were therapists. That comes in handy. And so, but I knew we were moving. There was no way he was going to get a job flying and us living in upstate New York where we were. So that was heartbreaking because it was my favorite job. We had such a great support system. So he found a job 2 months later. Thank God it wasn't 3 years. But that job was in New Jersey. So he was living there, living with my mom and my sister, actually. And I was in the house in upstate New York. And but after a year, he said, we've got to be together. And I was like, okay. So left my job, left our house, moved into a condo in New Jersey. And there, so again, no job, no friends. And I did have family close by, but so wasn't working for that 6 months. He got a full-time job with Merck, which then allowed us to move to Bucks County. So we bought a house in Doylestown. We moved there, and again, my mantra, no job, no family, no friends. And I thought, I'm going to smile at every person I see. And I thought going back into career coaching, I was going to do that. I worked part-time at DeVry University with undergrads and graduate students, then over to Lee Hecht Harrison in Philly, which was a CDS, but on an international level, and couldn't do the commute. We were meeting people in our neighborhood and making friends. And I finally went back and was a supervisor in a couple places with Live and Grin and Rehab After Work. And when I was at Rehab After Work, I started a codependency group, which everybody said I'd never be able to start, but I did. And when I turned 50, see how easily I talk about age, when I turned 50, I thought to myself, private practice. And if I don't do it now, I probably never will. And I literally thought about it for maybe a month. I looked at 2 offices, signed the lease, and what most people do is they start their private practice and they keep their full-time job until the private practice takes off. Not me. Quit the full-time job, just went into private practice. And my group ended up following me, and I thought, well, as long as I have my group once a week, I can pay my rent, we're all good. And, you know, my husband had his job, so it gave me some freedom to do that and really dig into what I thought I would love. And I did. And then a year later, guess what? Well, my mom passed away first, very suddenly. And then my husband lost his job again 6 months later. And that was tough because there was no way my salary was going to cover the bills. And he decided that he was going to do contract work, which he did. So basically, to sum it up, for the last 5 years, He's been away more than he's been home. Last year, I think he was away 260 nights. And so I'm home doing my job, taking care of the dog, keeping my social supports close at hand. And had I not managed my codependency, and it flares up every so often, and I have to reel it back in, there's no way that we would have made it this far. We've been married 31 years, and I think all of these things just prepared me for what I would be doing right now, which is what I love, treating individuals and groups and families and feeling their pain when they come in and tell me their story, and I can so relate it to mine, and just believing I have something to offer them in terms of hope. And see, how long was that? That was probably like 23 minutes. So I'm sorry, I was talking as fast as I could. So hopefully you get a sense of where I came from and where I am now. But thank you, and I'm sorry to bend your ear.
Thank you for sharing that.
I'm exhausted. Thank you.
Well, I was thinking of the story that I would share would be more connected to my journaling, so I would just like to start that I come from the era of growing up. One of my favorite authors was Judy Blume. Who else knows Judy Blume? So if I share my story, it's kind of related to how I got connected into journaling, and one of the first books that I remember reading was
Dear God, it's me. Are you there?
Are You There, God? I had to look it up today. I wasn't sure. Are You There, God? It's me, Margaret. And it's the 6th grade girl who chronicles her issues that she has of being a preteen, and mostly around sexuality and religion. And I thought, as in 1980, I was around the same age, and I got this little diary for my birthday from my brother. And I have been like Margaret ever since, trying to figure out sexuality and religion since then. So
I love it.
this was the first journal in 1980, and it's been a couple years in here, as I found out last night.
Should we read it?
Yeah, I was dying tonight when I opened up a page. I was like, oh, crap. But I also want to say, is journaling part of the gene pool? Because this is my grandmother, who's 98. This is her last journal that she wrote, which was 8 years ago. And I love it that it's Pac-Man. What I remember about my grandmother going to visit her next to her bed was always a diary. It was a 5-year diary. And my guess is that they didn't make 5-year diaries, so she made this Pac-Man journal into a 4-year diary. So I can look to see what she did in, every same August 11th from 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007. So she actually recently asked my mother who has her journals or diaries, and I said, I have one of them. And then I always heard the story that my mother had diaries up in the attic, but they were in shorthand. Who learned shorthand?
I
But she'd always say, I have them, but I don't know what they say because I don't know shorthand anymore. So those who know, I might bring them over and you can help me
It's been a long time.
decide or help me learn to know my mother better. So I wonder if journaling is in my gene pool. Mm-hmm. I don't know that, but I do have a love for writing, and I think it started, around Margaret. Margaret inspired me. Actually, my grandmother's Margaret. I never thought of that. That's cool. Well, anyway, so a journal is really something that chronicles events and happenings. So my grandmother was a reporter of the weather, so I can tell you what the weather was like on August 11th in 2004, 5, 6, and 7. She talked about who came over, who visited. I got a little deeper in mine, and I found, like Margaret, who talked to God as this was a friend, a constant there for you to discover and uncover things about ourselves. I was the youngest of 3 children. My baby book wasn't complete. Whenever we get the family slides out, there wasn't very many slides of me. We don't have many stories as a family for some reason. When we get together, we don't recall things that happened or vacations. So I was determined as a mother of 4 children that we were going to have memories and we were going to remember happenings. So in a little bit, I'll share some of my ideas. So I developed a hobby over the years. I know a lot of you have hobbies that I probably could never imagine doing, but one of my hobbies is collecting moments. And somebody has coined the term momentologist. I'm a momentologist. I collect moments. So my journaling has evolved from, I still keep a regular journal. I probably journal 5 to 7 times a month. Not every day, but it has evolved. And I think it's important to me to tell stories and to keep stories alive. And I'm interested in history and my family history. So I think it just kind of goes along with, fits with who I am. So last night, my teenage daughters were cracking up. I was on the kitchen floor dying about some of my boy craze days. And it was interesting. I'm a tall woman, and my daughters are both tall. And in here, they found out that I had written down how tall I was in 7th grade. I'd written my height a couple times. And my daughter said, "Mom, were you insecure about your height?" And it's just interesting to think back and reflect, and it made for a good conversation. And it allowed them to connect with me in a way that, hey, maybe Mom is more human than I think she is. So my journals and diaries, I was never afraid of anybody reading them because I always thought they scream that I'm human, and I wasn't afraid of people reading my journals. My mom did read my journal in college at one point and confronted me about what she read. And I remember us both crying together because it was a kind of a painful thing that happened to me. But I was glad that she knew, actually. It was, I think our greatest need is to be known and loved. And I guess I was just happy that she knew me in a way that I wasn't free to tell her. So I've never really been afraid of people reading my journals. I'm not afraid of dying and leaving them behind. I think they speak to who I am and what I've done in my life. They've been an incredible source of healing and growth. In my work, I help people grow and develop, and I think my journals have evolved. They show what I'm learning and growing in, so those are something that I value in journaling. I often hear people say, well, I have nothing to write about. My life is so boring. Actually, my daughter said that last night. My life is so boring, I have nothing to write about. But a journal always reminds me to make a life worth recording. So I'm always trying to think of, make a life worth recording. So my hobby has involved, like I said, while I still keep a journal, I will say that one key thing in thinking about talking tonight is I have always had a space to write. In my bedroom at home, there was a corner window. I sat in the corner where there was 2 windows, and I had a chair, and that was a space that kind of I claimed. And I was an extroverted. I was in the sports, and I think my bedroom and that space was a place to recharge. And I would recharge with a journal. It was a place to kind of let my hair down and be whoever I wanted to be. And now I've also created a space in my home. I've lived in the same home for 20 years, and it's important to me to have a space to slow down and to have a place to do yoga and a place to light candles. And so a space is very important to me. I can't say that it's important for everybody, but that's been an important key. So that's a little bit of my story.
That's good. Okay, so Kathleen bought my time, so I'm going to talk real quickly. So my profession is not writing. I do blogging, so I do write a little bit. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my story as a stepmother and mother. So I know some of you know my story, so I'm only going to focus on this part of my story. I am a mom of 5. I've raised 3 children who are stepchildren, and then we had 2 biological children together. 23 years later, I got divorced from their dad, but they are still my children. We are all very close. My daughter, which is was the maid of honor to my stepdaughter in July. So watching that happen this past July really let me sit back and finally congratulate myself internally that, wow, if my daughter, and I have her speech on my phone talking about her sister, that you would have never known that they were raised by 2 different mothers. So one of the tools I feel that is really important is journaling, and journaling with children. I go to bed every single night, and I thank God for what has happened that day. I find something good. Currently, I would like to say, God, please warm it up to 50 degrees. And I know it's at least 50, and I will thank Him. And every morning I wake up and I say, who can I help today? Who am I helping today? And so I journal in my head because I'm a visual person, and then I journal in writing. So my children, I'm not a yeller. So instead of yelling when they were growing up, I would say, Trina, go upstairs and write down what you did wrong today. So I always got them in the habit of writing, or I want you to come back and explain. And my son doesn't like to talk at all. He's very smart. He's a dean's list kid in college, but he doesn't, his complaint from his teachers was always he doesn't talk enough. So I used to say, JT, from when he was little, I want you to write. So I have journals of his, of little football men that he would draw. So he wouldn't write things, he would draw me pictures. My stepdaughter, one of them, is an artist. She would not write things either, but she would draw pictures. And so I always promised them that I would not look at their journals. And I only really failed with 2 of the kids because they didn't willingly show me what I saw. And I regret the one, and she's the oldest stepdaughter that actually lived with us, and she actually put me through a lot of trauma in my life. She had gone through some addictions herself, and I was the mean stepmother because I was the rule maker. And she was living with us, and so I would go in and want to read what she wrote, and then it would be like, my stepmother's such a bitch, you know, or and I was like, oh God, I can't believe I just read that. Now when she comes home, I can't stand her because I'm not liking her either. But now I gotta be nice to her, but I know what she wrote about me, you know. And then her dad's so great, who's never here. Sure, he's great because he's never here, you know. And I'm like, shit, I should have never read that. So you really do. And then my daughter, my biological daughter, I would read things like, I have no friends at school, you know, I'm so sad. She went through a very heavy phase. She was very heavy. And it was like all the little friends, because we had the house where all the kids came. I was that like June Cleaver mother that always baked and always had everything. And I'm like, oh my God, now I have to like this little 8-year-old that's coming over that's like pushing her off the seat in the bus because I was reading it. And I was like, I should not be reading this because I really want to hit this little girl. Because she would walk in and I was so sweet. And I'm like, oh my God, like you should not read this stuff. But because then they're best friends again the next day. So one of the things that I started with her was I bought a book and I read that she was crying because you know when you wrote notes in school and you passed them back and forth? Well, her best friends were not including her in the notes, and they were passing it over her, and she felt very left out. So I just kind of said, so how's school, honey? Like, what do you do at lunchtime? Do you guys write notes? Like, I was acting like I didn't really read it, but and she goes, no, and then she kind of told me what happened, and I said, well, I have a really good idea. I'm going to CVS, I'm getting a book, and I'm going to be your friend. And so every day when I packed her lunch, I would put this little book in there, and I would write her a note. And then she would write me a note in class. And so when she came home, when she went to bed, I took her note back out and I read it, and then I wrote her back. So I said, if you do not get a note in class, we have our friendship journal, and you will write to me, and you don't have to tell anyone it's mommy. You just say you have a friend that's not in the school or a friend somewhere else, whatever you need to say. And we had this journal, and I have all these journals going back and forth. And now she's 24, and she has told me that, I wrote it down. She has told me that the best thing about all the journals we've done is that you feel like you have a friend when you don't have a friend. So another thing I incorporated with my kids is when we were away from each other. So the one time a year my ex and I would go away. It was a work thing, so my mom would come watch them. And I had anxiety leaving my children. I am the helicopter mom. I'm totally guilty. So I have vacation journals. So I would leave a journal with mostly my daughter, because my son didn't really get into it too much. And then I would take one with me. And I would write down everything that I would do when I was away from her, and she would write down everything she did. And when we came home, we were so excited to exchange our journals. And I couldn't wait. It's like one of my prized possessions, because I got to just really write down what I was doing. I'm hanging by the pool, daddy's in a meeting, so it was a really nice way to get into something to look forward to. It was just and it's such a great keepsake now. You know, we laugh when she writes in here, I'm running away to Megan's house, like she's telling me where she was running away to. And it's really fun to watch now. But it really helps because even with my son, he's an accountant. And he's, like I said, straight A's. But when I went off after my divorce and started my own business, my kids wrote me this note, and these are hanging in my office. I just brought them here, and he wrote me, like I think it's 3 sentences. And I'm like, holy shit, like he wrote so much, you know, but he wrote, like he said, ever since, to our warrior, I'm just going to read his part, and you're all welcome to see this, but ever since we've been little, you've always been our #1 fan. From being room mom to football mom, you've been here for every step of the way of life. You've been the first one we tell about our greatest successes, and the first one when we need a little extra motivation. You've taught us to work hard for the things we love, and that anything is possible with the right attitude. And I'm like, oh my God, he would never have said that to me vocally, because he would have said, Mom, I love you, you're the greatest. I get that. But for him to write that, I think is because they were writing when they were younger, and it's okay to put it in words. You don't have to always vocalize it if you can't. But if you can't, so this to me was like, oh my God, anytime anybody writes me anything, to me it's like the best gift you can ever give anyone. So that I think is because of making them that it's okay to journal, you know, and ways that you can save. It doesn't have to be in a book all the time. So if you write me something, chances are I'm going to frame it. So I have anything handwritten, I might frame it because it means so much to me. This is better than giving me a materialistic present. If you write me something that came from your heart, my aunt told me something else I have hanging because she saw me hanging all this stuff. She goes, you know, I copied that from a Hallmark card. Because I was like, I go, oh my God, like I think I'm telling everyone a great writer you are. I'm crying, I'm hanging it up on my wall. She goes, well, I copied it in the store from a Hallmark card. I go, that's okay, you got out what you wanted to say. So another idea with the kids is, and I could pass it on, you don't have to just journal. My son is waiting for his. I'm really late. He's the 5th child. So when they graduate from high school, I did a journal with pictures and writing. Like I wrote them, like it's a letter to them, and it has pictures and stuff about what we've done, what they've done. My sons I didn't do for high school, and believe it or not, this big football player is like, Mom, where's my scrapbook journal? I was like, shit, I'm going to do it. I promise I'm going to do it. And now he's graduating college. So that's my project. That is my project, because I bawl as I start to write these letters to them of all the things. But I think most importantly, a way to journal is when I got divorced. So we go through a transition, and I'm a stepmom. And I raised these kids, and now I'm divorcing their dad. And it's like, oh boy, like it was really, I'm the one that wanted the divorce, so I'm initiating this, and the one stepdaughter is not too happy, because she had me up here, and now she said I was knocked down to here. I was like, okay, you go through your thing, whatever, you know, we're very close now. But that Christmas, and I work with, whoever doesn't know, I work with women going through divorce. So that Christmas, I always say to everyone, you want the first year to go by. Like I wanted the first birthday to go by, I wanted the first Mother's Day, the first Christmas, and I love life. I love my age, I don't ever wish time away except for the winter. And I was like, oh my God, get me through every one of these holidays. So I get the feeling. But that Christmas, I thought, what am I going to do, mostly to my stepdaughters? Like, what am I doing to let them know that I don't know what lane they want me in, because unless you're a step-parent, you don't, and I don't know who's a step-parent in here, but you don't understand that there is that lane, and to me, it's harder than being a mother, because you have this line that you're constantly tight walking on. So I got them all a journal, all 5 of the kids. And what I did was, it was my gift to you, and I wrote what I knew about them. Ashley, the oldest one, is not good with change. She just doesn't do good with change. She doesn't like meeting new people at first. She just has a hard time. She's too smart to know how to brush her hair. Like, she's just one of those smart people that doesn't know the daily, like, cleanliness things. And so I even wrote that. Don't forget to brush your hair, you know. And she was, she wasn't that young at the time I'm writing this journal, So, and they laughed. And so each of them, I wrote something. And it was so funny because I thought it would be most important to my stepdaughters. And so my daughter Danielle, my biological one, I said to her the other day, oh, I'm speaking at the Sisters U about journaling. She goes, oh. And I said, because it's not my profession by any means, stretch of the means, but I said, I go, what was one of your favorite journals that you've done? And she goes, Mom, I love the journal you gave when you got divorced. And I literally sat back and said, shit, I forgot I really wrote something to her. But I did. And I wrote, because I was so thinking that my stepdaughters were going to benefit from this. But it was even her. She was like, I loved that the note you wrote. And that, you know, how our family is different. But I haven't, you know, I look back at that. But I want to go on a little bit and say about what journaling did to me, for me. It wasn't as positive as Trina's. Mine was because of the hate of my husband. Not the hate, but the upsetness with my husband. I was married to someone who was a narcissist, to be honest. And I'm sorry if any of you know him, but I mean, he's a nice guy. But he would constantly, if we got into an argument, it was, I say, you never do this. Never? Never? What do you mean never? Never? I didn't do it the other day. I didn't do it last year. I didn't do it 10 years ago. Never, 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 never. And he'd be in my face. Or I would say, you always tell me this. What do you mean always? I always tell you this? Tell me the last time I said this. Tell me 3 times that I told you this. And I'm like, I'm going to start journaling. I'm going to journal everything down. And I'm going to tell you, that's what you should do. You should journal. So this way you could see that I don't do that. I'm like, okay. So I'm not ready to be vulnerable enough with my children yet for that. But if they find my journals, I verbatim would write down what he would say, and you will see quotes, because as soon as he would say it, I'd be like, I can get my journal. And I would literally write, it's like chicken scratch, it's like all over, it's in quotes, I have the exact words. So, but it helped me. It helped me not to feel so freaking crazy. Like, I'm not making this up. He does say this to me, and so now, when he says that, I'm like, okay, like on March 5th, you said it. And then he would go, you're crazy, and he'd walk away. Because he had nothing to say to me. Because I had it like all in writing. And then I would say, don't get mad. You told me to write it all down. So I have it all written down. So I have like 6 journals. And I hide them. And like I just found one. I read it because I think he's being nice now. I've been divorced 7 years. I think he's being nice. And then I read the journal. I'm like, oh my God, he was so mean to me. So I try not to look at it. But it really did help me to feel just normal, like, okay, I'm not making this stuff up in my head. So journaling for me is so important on so many levels. I also love when I'm around people. I have so many different types of journals. It's crazy. They're everywhere. But there's you don't have to always be a writer. So if you say something profound to me today, it will come. This is a new journal. It will come in my book somewhere, and I'll write your initials who said it in case anyone finds it and you don't want to be, but I'll write your initials. Oh God, I wrote her own name. But I'll write. Oh, that's a good one. So I'll write it down, or if you.
Anyone's gonna find it.
If you send me something that's handwritten, I will tape it into a book. So I don't have to write it all day. You know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. And then I love, this I keep in the desk in my drawer at work. So this is quotes that I like to share because people think that I'm like genius. They'll say, oh my God, you always say the right thing. Oh my God, I love what you say. Oh my God, that's so great. And they're like, how do you know how to do all this? I go, because I write down everything everyone tells me. So I really am like a sponge of all the women I'm ever around because why reinvent something? If you tell me something great, I'm going to reuse it. How I do that is through journaling. And I really think it's when you're having a bad day or you're having a great day and you do want somebody to find it. But most importantly for me, it was when I'm having a bad moment or I need my own self-motivation, I can read this and say, oh my God, Catherine, thank God for you. I can read that this woman wrote this to me in April 2016. And I'm like, oh, God, I love this. I needed this today. So that's another really important thing. But for the kids, it's also really important to have that connection and then to see what they can then write to you because of that, or just the different ways that you can share that. And I love going back and reading like the things that I've done with my kids, and it's all in writing here, and stuff they did, and they have this. So that's what I wanted to talk to you all about, just give you ideas and what I actually do and how it helps. And I always tell my clients, journal everything, because we forget. So when you go to bed at night, you write down. I'm a list person too, so you write down, what did I not do today? What do I need to do tomorrow? It clears your head, you sleep better. What you're thankful for is the best thing to do, because that's what we want to focus on. And then I always say, how are you going to make me better tomorrow? You know, it's the end of my prayer every night. You know, thank you for whatever happened today, and please help me be a better person tomorrow. You know, and that's just another cleansing way of journaling.
And then one of my, I should say my most prized journals has to do with my husband. Has journaled in his past, hasn't recently, but he is a writer. So I would say I'm going to share this idea, but you can do it with anybody, any child, any significant person in your life. But I call it the commitment journal. This is a journal that we started 7 years into our marriage in 1999. And we've just decided that instead of writing in cards that get tossed, we would write to each other. And so I have never read through it all, except this past year. I'm coming home from our 25th anniversary excursion. I read the whole thing out loud to him, to us, and I was bawling because it shows commitment, because we've been through, as some of you know, our own challenges. So photo booths, things are stuck in here. My vows are in here. Things that mean connection to me is in here. But it's just a place to... you know, and I have to say, there was a couple years, 3-4 years we didn't write, so just so you don't get the idea that this is something we do once a year maybe, but it's just a way to have it all in one place. So that's a treasured thing that...
That's a nice idea for like a shower gift,
Yeah.
a bridal shower
Yeah,
gift,
it is.
or wedding gift. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that on everyone to do that, but it's not for everyone, and I get that. But like I said, you could. I actually thought of, when you talked about with children, thought of doing this for as a gift to a child every year at Christmas, just to have it all in one place, kind of reflect on the past year and what they've been through, the challenges, how you've seen them grow. So that's my next thing. So those are some ideas.
That's a good idea, because what you do with that bowl, I actually have a bulletin board in my house. I notice my daughter has one in her apartment now, but I put everything that happens for the year on it.
Okay, that's a journal.
So every time I'm at the kitchen sink, mine happens to be to the left of my sink. So it's, you know, whoever sends me a save the date, or my son got on the dean's list letter, same thing. So I just do it on a yearly.
I chose to talk about writing and writing tools because for some reason that sounds like less of a commitment than journaling, and things that I use with my clients, but also things that I use for myself. And the first one I think Catherine alluded to was the gratitude journal or gratitude list. And a lot of times I see people, and I'm guilty of this too, getting into this whole negative sequence of things, and everything sucks, life sucks. There's no way of changing that perspective. So I either have people write a list of all the things they're grateful for, and then put it somewhere where they'll see it every day, especially first thing in the morning to kind of start their day, or on a daily basis to write down 3 things at the end of the day that they're grateful for. And the trick is not to write the same 3 things every day, but to try and do 3 different ones. And the hope is that after a while, they will start to look at the world a little bit differently and change perspective, because that's where the healing is, right? And so they will start to look for things in their day, because they know at the end of the day, I got to write down 3 things in my grateful journal. So if I can find them, it'll be a lot easier. And that seems to help. And then also what I'll do is I'll have them keep a little happiness scale at the bottom of each day. 1 being I'm happy, because we don't go past happy, and 10 being ecstatic. And what was my happiness score today? And after a while, I think you can start to see themes or patterns on your high happiness score days. What was going on and that I was grateful for? And you'll start to see, and then you can start to incorporate more of that into your life. So that's really helpful. Another tool is letter writing. And I don't know if any of you have done that, but a lot of times when clients are stuck and they're holding on to guilt or shame or anger, it's about writing a letter to someone, whether they're still alive, whether they've passed away, to have closure. I've written my mother several letters and emails because she died so suddenly. I didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye or to thank her for things, or even to apologize for things I did throughout my life. And so that's been very helpful to me. You can write to someone to ask forgiveness. If you've been carrying around guilt and shame for a week or a month or 20 years that you can't seem to get past, you can write a letter asking forgiveness or forgiving someone, because it goes both ways. And you can write a letter to yourself, a letter of compassion or empathy or encouragement to your former self or even your future self, and keep that with you. And then the question is, do I send the letter or do I not send the letter? And I always advocate for not sending the letter, because I think the healing is in the writing, and the healing is for you, not for the recipient. And we can't control how the recipient is going to react to that. So I always say the power is in the writing itself. And then if you really need a visual, I say if you have a fire pit, if you have a fireplace, toss it in there and let it go off into the universe and let it go. Because it's all about unburdening ourselves, right? And creating space for empowerment and creativity. So that's another thing that works. Or I don't know if anyone's ever done stream of consciousness writing. That one helps me totally, because I have a Polish temper, and boy, I can really get angry. And a lot of times we can't say those words, or they're going to be extremely hurtful, or we're afraid to say them. And that emotion becomes so overwhelming. So I say, grab a piece of paper and start writing, and write, and another piece, and write, and keep writing until that energy comes down and decreases, and then do what you want with that. Save it. I mean, maybe that's the start of a journal. Or let it go. Rip it up, tear it up, burn it, whatever you need to do with it. But I think it's incredibly helpful in creating that space and letting go. And the last thing I think that Catherine had talked about was the before you go to bed. And I'm a good one for going to bed, and as soon as my head hits the pillow, my eyes pop open, and I start thinking about my clients that day, what they said, what I didn't get done, and that critical voice that comes in, oh, you didn't get that done, or you didn't get that done. And it keeps us up. And so I do keep a little book next to my bed, and what I'll do is I'll write down all the things that I didn't accomplish, all the things I can't get out of my head, and it gives me kind of permission to leave it and put it aside, and permission to kind of rest and go to sleep. But I think the most important thing of all of this that we talked about is there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's your way. So however you choose to write, however you choose to journal, it's just that. And it's not about what you write, but just finding the time. Because I don't think any of us really realize we don't take the time. We're so busy to even think, am I happy? Am I doing what I want to do? Is this what I want to? We don't take that time. We just put one foot in front of the other. And I've been so guilty of that. So to take that time, and, introspection is learned over time if practiced. We're not born learning how to do it. We don't learn it in high school. We don't learn it in college. You can't really take a course in it. It's just something that you gain by taking the time and writing some things down. And I always say to write like no one else is going to read it. Because if you write to an audience, I think you risk getting caught up in the performance of it, and it loses its authenticity. And I'm a big proponent of practice what you preach. So with all of this, I bought myself a journal. And I'm starting with prompts. And I started working on it last week, and I really like it. So I thought, I can't go up there and talk about, journaling or writing if I haven't done it. So I'm working on it. So thanks.
Can I just end with a quote? I said to my kids today that I'm a quote junkie, but I think if I read all my journals, I'd come up with some good quotes of my own. But I don't have a good quote of my own. But I want to quote Sark. Have you ever heard of Sark? Wild Succulent Woman. She writes, her writing is like a journal. She says, whatever coaxes us out of hiding to write, record, and express is a revolutionary act. I love that. Start a revolution, ladies. It says that we believe that our lives count. Our lives do count. So come out of hiding. It's a revolutionary act to express yourself, and thank you that you've given us some good ideas on how to do that. And it says that we believe our lives count, right? What we are trying to do is helping others, our kids, ourselves believe that our lives count, and they do. So hopefully you take some nuggets tonight.